Lewis Hamilton received a heavy penalty in Mexico of 10 seconds. Because of this, after the race, he was furious with the FIA, and we saw that Verstappen cut it too, but he wasn't penalized. In today's video, we'll look at Lewis Hamilton's statements and how the FIA should have acted from my point of view. We'll also look at the telemetry to complete the analysis and also see Ferrari's performance after the Mexican GP, Leclerc's wrong start, and finally look at the world standings for the upcoming races. Before we begin, please leave a supportive like. And now let's see everything in detail. Lewis Hamilton experienced another nightmare GP. Aggressive start, tight battle with Verstappen, but a decision by the stewards ruins everything for him. 10-second penalty that sparks controversy. Double standards, favoritism, and the usual story. Hamilton doesn't hold back and speaks out. Verstappen had already cut earlier, so why wasn't he penalized? And me? A phrase that reopens a wound never closed between him and the Federation. At the start, Hamilton gets wedged between Leclerc, Norris, and Verstappen. It's the moment he hopes to recover, but instead he finds himself chasing. In the duel with Max, the incident occurs. First, the Dutchman goes long and returns to the track without consequences. A few meters later, he touches with Hamilton. But the stewards decide that only he gained an unfair advantage, resulting in 10 seconds that weigh like a stone. Hamilton defends himself. Off the racing line, it was full of dirt. I just tried not to lose the car and re-enter safely. What could I have done differently? The Englishman directly attacks the Federation. I am disappointed with the FIA. Verstappen wasn't penalized, but he cut too. I go off track because it was dirty and I get 10 seconds. The result is disastrous. 8th at the finish line behind Russell's Mercedes. Another race that takes away a podium that seemed within reach for Hamilton. And the idea of an immediate rebirth at Ferrari remains postponed. At Ferrari, the team radio is incredulous. Fans are divided. Some see a driver error, while others see an FIA that continues to change standards and judgment depending on the case. Verstappen's name inevitably returns to the center. It already happened. It happens again. The sporting battle also becomes political. In this war of nerves, Hamilton feels alone against the system again. And I understand him, Hamilton, because it's okay to give him a penalty because he cut, but not 10 seconds. It really seems too much, because yes, he made a mistake. He locked up. The car was unstable at that point, off the racing line, but he didn't gain enough to justify a 10-second penalty. While on the other hand, yes, Verstappen was forced off the line, actually off the track, but he gained an advantage by deliberately extending the braking and cutting through the entire chicane. So Verstappen's move was smarter and wasn't penalized, while Hamilton's move, caused by a mistake, cost him 10 seconds. Do you understand there's an injustice? But let's analyze the two episodes in detail. Let's start with the cut at turn 1. Norris and Hamilton stay on track. Leclerc and Verstappen instead cut the chicane. The Monegasque returns the position to avoid trouble. Not Verstappen. He stays ahead until Hamilton overtakes him at turn 4. All is regular for the stewards, no penalty. However, Hamilton doesn't see it that way. I did turns 1, 2, and 3 staying on track. Others cut and maintained gain positions and were not penalized. From the first radio communications, the 7-time world champion asks for clarifications, but his questions remain unanswered. On lap 6 comes the moment that changes Hamilton's fate. Verstappen's attack in turn 1, both wide on the escape route. Again, no penalty for the Dutchman. Hamilton doesn't protest. For him, it's just a race incident. But the real problem comes a few corners later. Lockup at turn 4. Hamilton is forced onto the dirt. The FIA introduced a mandatory strip of asphalt to follow for those who make a mistake at that point, and it's meant to slow down. Instead, Hamilton cuts over the grass and holds the position against Max, even though Verstappen was not clearly ahead in that braking. The result is a 10-second penalty without appeal. The official justification: he arrived too fast to follow the escape route, but still gained an advantage. A paradox that Hamilton cannot accept. Hamilton tried to explain: I locked the tires and ended up in a very dirty area. The escape route was impractical, and I did what I could to re-enter safely. But the steward's decision breaks his race. 8th at the finish line, behind Russell. Podium is far away. Once again, despite the result, Hamilton tries to see the positive side. The feeling with the SF25 is finally arriving. Qualifying pace is improving, and the sensations in wheel-to-wheel combat are encouraging. But a question remains in the air. Why are certain maneuvers penalized and others not? The doubt about the FIA's consistency resurfaces in the discussion, and Hamilton is again at the center of the regulatory storm. Because in the chaos of Mexico City, more than the track, it was discretion that decided the result. Let's also look at what Lewis Hamilton's telemetry says about what happened in turn 4 with Verstappen. Despite protests and accusations of double standards, new data emerges explaining why the FIA had no doubts in penalizing Lewis Hamilton during the Mexico City GP. In fact, a 10-second penalty seems exaggerated because it turned a podium race into a bitter 8th place. But the telemetry explains why this penalty was given. The data provided by analysts show the difference between the turn 4 incident between Hamilton and Verstappen cutting turn 1 at the start, At turn 4, Hamilton brakes later than Verstappen, the front right locks up. The Ferrari ends up wider than expected. On the grass, the car doesn't slow down sufficiently. The result is that Hamilton does not follow the mandatory asphalt path indicated by race control, and by doing so, keeps the position ahead of the Red Bull. For the FIA, there is no interpretation. It is a gain in position, therefore a standard penalty. In the official Stewards document, it is clearly stated that the lockup justifies not respecting the escape route, but does not justify the advantage gained. Hamilton gains about 0.8 on Verstappen and does not return the position. In short, the telemetry eliminates any doubt. But the 10-second penalty is too much, considering Hamilton only gained 0.8 on Verstappen. Surely, if Hamilton had given the place to Verstappen immediately, everything would have been resolved there. Instead, he serves the 10 seconds at the pit stop, slips out of the top 10, and recovers up to 8th place. A race that went well, ended very badly, especially due to the handling of events immediately following the cut. The duel between Hamilton and Verstappen has returned once again in Formula 1 with two completely different driving styles. But when the FIA puts numbers, GPS, analysis, and charts on the table, the discussion becomes simple. Hamilton essentially gained time off track, and in Formula 1, that's not allowed. In my opinion, the penalty is unfair. 10 seconds seem like an eternity for what Hamilton actually gained. He didn't even follow the escape route because it was impossible to follow it at that moment. It was too dirty. The outer part outside the track, the trajectory was too dirty, and he said it himself over the radio. In fact, even Vasur himself supports the British driver. The Ferrari team principal points the finger at the stewards. The penalty is disproportionate, and the unclear handling of the Hamilton-Verstappen case has opened a new episode, which continues to be discussed, costing Hamilton another chance for his first podium in red. Vasur stated, 10 seconds, I don't remember another penalty so heavy, and not considering that Max had cut first. If it had been 5 seconds, everything would have changed. In fact, the team principal sees the race change in an instant. The penalty knocks Hamilton to the back of the group after the pit stop, and it's impossible to recover in the final part. The 4th position was within reach, Vasur said. With 5 seconds, we would have finished 4th. With 10 seconds, the race is over. A clear message. The penalty destroyed Ferrari's strategy. The crux of the matter is consistency. Why wasn't Verstappen penalized for similar incidents? Chicane cut during battle, cut at turn 1 at the start. No penalty for Max and 10 seconds for Lewis. And Vasur replied, I don't want to be like a football coach, complaining about others, but 10 seconds are excessive. In the FIA report, the stewards wrote that there is no violation for not using the mandatory path, meaning excessive speed, but Hamilton kept the position on Verstappen and did not return it. According to the regulations, the penalty is standard, but 10 seconds seems too much, and Ferrari has nonetheless proven to be very strong in Mexico, confirming the performances we saw in Austin. Let's see why. In fact, Ferrari leaves America with 2 consecutive podiums between Austin and Mexico City and regains 2nd place in the Constructors' Championship ahead of Mercedes, just 1 point. The SF25 is back ahead of the others as Vasur wanted, but the gap to Norris remains huge, 30 seconds that capture reality. Leclerc held strong, delivering a flawless weekend. In fact, after a complicated start, he touched with Hamilton, cut the corner to avoid hitting Norris and Verstappen, then rejoined cleanly, returned the position where needed, and then had a fully managed race. The tires were under control, the pace was steady, and he didn't make a mistake. It was a surprising podium, said Charles. Ferrari optimized everything it could optimize, and the rest is still far off. The last 2 laps could have changed everything. In fact, Verstappen had Leclerc in his sights with better tires. Verstappen had the soft tires with fewer laps. Leclerc had the medium tires with more laps. Then the virtual safety car for Sainz's spin freezes the situation, and Leclerc also knows that without the virtual safety car, it would have been hard to keep Max behind. So he also had a bit of luck, but that's also needed when 2nd place is at stake. As for Hamilton, he read it himself. The frustration is evident. I stayed on track, others cut and passed me. And for the 7-time world champion, it's becoming tough to see his teammate always on the podium while he never makes it, having completed 20 Grands Prix in red, without getting on the podium. A record no one would have wanted to see. Vasur sees that Ferrari is growing, but it can no longer waste anything. In fact, the team principal is satisfied, but he's not hiding anything. We needed to avoid mistakes like in Baku and Singapore. Here we brought it all together. Translated, Ferrari has no margin for error. Every race weekend has to be flawless. Only this way can we stay ahead of Mercedes in the final World Championship rush. But beware, Verstappen might be at risk of another penalty due to the virtual safety car at the end with Leclerc. Let's see what Charles said about this episode. We said Leclerc saved 2nd place in the Mexican Grand Prix thanks to the final virtual safety car. Verstappen was catching up with a furious comeback. But Leclerc opens the radio at the end and asks for something no Ferrari fan would have ever thought. Max gained too much, it's a sure penalty. With 3 laps to go, the two are separated by 1 second. In the 3rd sector, Verstappen gets closer by 0.6 at turn 13 and makes a thrilling braking move. Leclerc sees him getting closer and closer in the mirrors. He knows Max has set everything up to attack in turn 1, and it's at that moment that Charles comments with a half smile. Max has gained so much, surely a penalty will come. The race control displays the double yellow flag for the head-to-head with Sainz. Leclerc immediately lifts his foot. Verstappen only slows down shortly before turn 16. The data shows that Max still reduces the gap, but loses 0.4 in that section, enough to avoid triggering anything from the FIA. It's a very fine line between a successful attack and a guaranteed penalty. In short, the virtual safety car saved Leclerc. Verstappen was faster at the end and even risked getting a penalty for not slowing down enough. After the race, the FIA clarified that Verstappen did slow down. He was on the verge of a penalty, but managed to slow down enough and therefore won't be penalized. And there are two problems with these situations: the behavior of the FIA, and certainly also the fact that Hamilton and Leclerc somewhat obstructed each other at the start, preventing them from having a clean race afterward. Verstappen tried everything to pass Hamilton first and then tried to pass Leclerc at the end. But we definitely see a scenario where the FIA behaves differently depending on the drivers. They should behave consistently, actually see what someone has gained by cutting, and then give a penalty accordingly. You can't penalize a driver so much without having gained so much advantage. Because remember that Hamilton only gained 0.8 over Verstappen, and the penalty was seconds. But what's the current situation in the Drivers' Championship? Norris seems to have been reborn, while Piastri is slowly sinking. In fact, Norris returns as leader at the decisive moment. Piastri has collapsed, and it will take a miracle to stay in the race. After almost 190 days, Lando Norris returns to the top of the Drivers' Championship, and does so in the most important weekend of the season, when McLaren had to react. He delivered a perfect performance. The decisive qualifying lap, the manual start, and the management in a tricky race like Mexico City was a total success. It's confirmation of a Norris who, when he has the car to dominate, makes no more mistakes. McLaren came from 4 difficult races, internal doubts, discussions about driver management, and a championship that seemed to slip away. Norris understood that it was one of his last psychological match points and responded accordingly. Clear victory, leadership regained, and a message to Verstappen and Piastri: I am here. McLaren builds a wall around its drivers, but the internal dynamics are clear. Norris has returned to the role of the front runner. Piastri has to chase. Piastri, on the other hand, is at his lowest point of the season. Oscar Piastri is experiencing a moment that no one expected. From championship leader to a struggling driver in a matter of a few races. The pressure did the rest. Norris has grown, the car has become competitive again, and Piastri has been left behind. It's not just a matter of points, it's a mental issue. Fans forget quickly. Verstappen took years to become a title-winning machine. Leclerc struggled to learn how to manage the tires. Piastri is now experiencing his first real obstacle as a potential champion. Let's also remember that he's in his 3rd year in Formula 1 and is very young, only 24 years old. To turn the championship around, a resurrection will be needed. A heavy but realistic word. The technical truth is that McLaren is still the car to beat, and Andrea Stella states it clearly. Mexico has removed any doubt. It's not about the math, it's about competitiveness. And we have it. 2 months of no victories had instilled fear. Mexico sweeps away that fear. Now, the Papaya team has complete confidence, and 4 races to play with the best weapon. A car that can dominate. The championship is reopened, yes, but with a different balance. This summer has been the story of a championship split in 2. Piastri to beat and Norris pursued. Now the opposite. Norris sets the pace, while Piastri must survive the upcoming tracks. They will be Brazil, Las Vegas, Qatar, and Abu Dhabi. 4 tracks where Max can attack again, but also 4 chances for McLaren to wrap things up with one of its 2 drivers. And this time, it's Norris who is more ready. Piastri didn't make excuses after the race, he admitted. We need to analyze the race pace, and theories about a possible conspiracy don't distract him. Oscar Piastri lost the championship lead, and some fans are already murmuring about McLaren favoritism towards Norris. On social media, some even talk about sabotage, but the Australian responds as a mature driver. No controversies. We need to understand why he can no longer keep up with his teammate. The difference between the two in Mexico was clear. Norris won dominantly, and Piastri finished 5th, 40 seconds behind, and the standings are overturned. +1 for Lando in the standings with 116 points still available. I changed my driving style, but in traffic you can't make sense of anything. This is what Piastri said. In fact, in the race, he found himself fighting in traffic after a bad start from 8th place. He managed to climb back, yes, but always with dirty air and few references. I don't know if the changes to my style have worked. Behind so many cars, you don't really feel the car itself. McLaren explains the driver's decline this way. With the great heat, when the car slips, his way of driving no longer performs as it did in the first 19 races of the year. A complicated adaptation, especially when you're in the middle of a world championship battle. Piastri is clear-headed, and these 2 difficult weekends are a test. Understanding what doesn't work is worth more than an easy excuse. Find more pace and return to winning. Period. This is Piastri's message, and it's crystal clear. And even Andresen himself has stated, Oscar has learned a lot. He is more complete as a driver. So a step forward was made this weekend for Piastri, who must try to catch up with his teammate, who seemed lost until a few races ago. But many changes have been tried for Piastri, with data analysis after qualifying, video review, telemetry compared with Norris, and technical and driving approach adaptations with the traffic in the race. It was difficult to test the changes made. However, in the upcoming races, we'll see if we find a stronger Piastri capable of fighting for the championship alongside Norris and Verstappen. Let me know in the comments your opinion on the clash between the FIA and Lewis Hamilton. Do you think the 10-second penalty given to Lewis was fair? What do you think about the lack of penalty for Verstappen for the collision at the start in turn 1? And also, after the battle with Hamilton, in your opinion, was it Leclerc who was too aggressive at the start blocking Hamilton? Ferrari has improved. Will we see them stronger in Brazil as well? How do you see the world clash between Norris, Piastri and Verstappen? I'm curious to read and respond to all your comments. As always, I remind you to leave a like, subscribe and activate notifications so you don't miss any videos on the channel. That's all from Rasta. See you in the next video.